You sure it's recording? Just check it.
Yes.
Okay.
What grade or subject did you teach in your most recent completed years of teaching?
Last year I taught high school geometry 9th through 12th grade, mostly 10th and 11th graders, but I had some freshmen and some seniors.
What were your big pictures, inspirations for this year? In other words, what did you want your students walking away from your classroom with? Why? Were you successful?
So going into my first year of teaching, my only goal was that students wanted to learn, and I as a teacher made that happen. A lot of my students are always very broadly say, oh, well, you failed me. And my goal was to make them take responsibility not only for their grades, but for their education as well in a broader sense. By the end of the year, I would say 90% of my students were pretty responsible for their own grades, not only in my class, but in others. The other 10% though, I really focused on this year reaching those students that were a little harder to reach.
What measurable goals did you set for students learning, and how did you decide on them? Did your students ultimately reach the goal you set? What specifically were their results?
Okay, we have 4 big goals in my classroom. The first one is for all students to maintain 80% mastery on objectives. The other one is for all students, 100%, to score proficient or advanced on the geometry EOI. Our third one is for all students who choose to take the ACT to score a 22 or above composite score. And our last one is for 100% of students to make a goal each semester and track that goal in order to see whether or not they accomplish it towards the end of the semester. I tracked student mastery on Excel, and my students performed fairly well. It was very, very representative of the EOI data we ended up having at the end of the year. It reflected my results almost perfectly. My EOI pass rate was 81%, and 9% of those were scoring advanced. It wasn't 100%, but that only means it's 29% to grow next year. 2 of my students took the ACT, and they scored a 25 and a 28. The fact that only 2 out of 176 students took the ACT was a little disheartening. It made me emphasize the importance of the test even more this year. I was very proud of those 2 students. This year I've had one that ended up with a 32, and I'm super excited for him and what he's going to accomplish. The goal that we did reach 100% was our goal for students to make a goal each semester. We spent a day each semester taking that time to make a goal, make an action plan of what we were going to do to meet that goal, and then monitoring it throughout the semester. Some of my students weren't super excited about the idea, but as they got excited about holding me accountable for my goal and checking in on me, it helped them a little more with their goals.
What are your biggest reflections on how you could have improved upon that year of teaching?
So I was really proud of my students for studying super hard for their EOI. They really buckled down during our EOI review time. But I was saddened that some were shocked by the fact that they passed. They would get their score on their screen and they would call me over and I would say, oh my goodness, you passed, high five. And they were shocked that they had passed. No one needs to be boasting that they're the smartest person in this school, but to me, I want my kids to have confidence in what they're doing and know that they have the ability to pass that EOI because it's what they've been studying all year long. So this directly to me tied to our tripod student surveys. Last year I scored really, really high on challenge, captivate, and consolidate, but I scored very low on care. Specifically the question, my teacher seems to know when something is bothering me. So this year I made a conscious effort to get to know students from day one and to let them get to know things about my life. I feel like my classes grasp concepts better, they're less disruptive. We get a little off topic sometimes, but I feel like it all contributes to the learning environments much, much more than it did last year.
What grades and or subjects are you currently teaching?
So this year I still teach high school geometry. This year my students are mostly 9th and 10th graders, but I still have juniors and seniors mixed in.
What are your aspirations and measurable goals for this year? How did you decide on them? If you changed anything from last year's aspiration, measurable goals, what and why?
So my goals are still the same. They're the exact same posted in my classroom, exact same places they were last year, but the actions I take to reach them are quite different. Along with working on the caring side from my tripod surveys, I've also shifted a serious approach in behavior management. Last year, I had a very, very bad tendency, especially as a first-year teacher, to argue with students in class or to, continually attempt to put my foot down. This year, instead of disrupting education time, I asked the student to step outside into the hallway until I'm able to meet with them. And I finish the lesson. I get myself to a pausing or stopping point with the rest of my class, make sure they're occupied with work, and I step outside to talk to the student. I found that when I ask a student to step outside, it makes a grand difference in their attitude. They don't try to show off as near as much, and they're very more real with you as a teacher. And they're much more responsible for their actions. They're much more willing to apologize, and we go back into class and everything is wonderful. It's very, very, very rarely not worked.
How do you decide what to teach on any given day, week, month? In other words, what is your planning process?
Okay, I start with our TPS curriculum map that is provided for us through the district. It's the geometry one, but our school requires 6 units, so I take that geometry map and I rework it into 6 units that is required by our school. I use a mixture of the TPS Pass Forward standards, which are Common Core aligned. They are just Common Core standards, but TPS brands them as Pass Forward standards. And I use EOI Pass standards, and I tend to mix them together to create objectives, see where they overlap, where things are a little different. I start that way with those standards to formulate big ideas. And then as those big ideas form, I have questions that answer those big ideas. And from those questions, I formulate little tiny objectives that are going to be used on a daily basis. While I'm doing that, I turn that objective kind of into a focus question. My essential question and my focus question kind of mold together. The reason I use a focus question is our school requires a Bloom's taxonomy level 4 or higher focus question per lesson per day. So I tend to mix the essential questions in with the focus questions. And as I'm doing that, I find where are students going to struggle to grasp this, and I use that as an anticipated misunderstanding. As these arise, I found that sometimes I can completely judge what misunderstanding students are going to have in a lesson, and other times I don't know until I've taught the lesson what people are going to misunderstand. So after I've taught it to first hour, they're my guinea pig class, I normally know exactly what pitfalls we're going to hit and how to address them in later classes. Once I have all of those objectives, I put them in a calendar, taking into account our advisory days where classes are cut short, and our early release days where we don't see 6th and 7th hour, and then holidays. And then I construct what our school calls a daily plan for success, which is our lesson plan template, and submit those to admin.
How and when do you track progress toward your goals? How do you use the information you track?
Okay, so we track goals in our classroom in a variety of ways. Our goals this year has been my main focus in getting students invested in my goals. Last year I was tracking them, but this year I want my students invested in them. So I use our gradebook to track individual mastery for exit tickets, quizzes, and standards. We use standards-based grading at our school, which has done wonders for data tracking. Students use this data wall, which has broken down by standard. When they master that objective, they put their name on a sticky note and put it up there so that you can see the standards that we've covered and the ones we have yet to cover this semester. We also have our Math Madness wall, which switches from math to football depending on the season, where I track class mastery. And it also has a countdown to the EOI review. In the fall, it was math football. Getting to the other line of the class, who has the highest at the end of each unit normally either gets a free day or a day we go outside and work on a mathy project that pertains to tying geometry to the real world.
Aubrey Scales, please come to the main office. Aubrey Scales.
Students use individual trackers. They each have a folder that is organized in the back of class where they track their standards. By objective and standard, with each test, with diagnostic, with midterm, with each time that we assess. And then students are encouraged to always share ACT scores with me, or if they need help signing up for ACTs, finding waivers through counselors, I am always attentive to that. And our semester goals are turned in through journal entries.
How do you ensure that your assessments are both rigorous and aligned to your goals and plans?
So using standards-based grading, it's amazing to be able to align my tests specifically to which standard I want, whether it's a pass-forward standard or an EOI pass standard. Each test is broken down into 3 different grades instead of 1 grade. So instead of handing back a student an 84, they're handed back a standard 3.1, 15%, standard 3.2, 100%, standard 3.3, 82%. They're able to see exactly which standard they need to work on, which has done wonders to align things. Getting students to come retake that section of the test has been another challenge this year, but we're definitely working towards it. Students track each one of these. They track their quizzes, they track their exit tickets, they see what they need to review before the next assessment, and then after that assessment they determine whether or not they feel they need to retake it. My cutoff for retaking is 80%. Some students who have an 82 on a standard want to retake that to at least up it to a 100. And then at the beginning of the year, I give my diagnostic, which is exactly EOI aligned, down to each individual question. So if the blueprint of the EOI says there are 4 questions on lines and angles, there are 4 questions on my diagnostic on lines and angles, down to the exact number of questions. I give that diagnostic at the beginning of the year. We grade it and we track it. And students determine whether or not they've mastered that. For example, this student mastered one objective, which was actually 5.2 on her diagnostic. So she knew that much before she even took the class. Then I give that exact same test as a midterm, and they fill out the exact same tracker. Only the standards that we have covered are highlighted, so they can go through and compare each one side by side and what they've done and how much they've grown. For example, this student, of all the standards we have covered, didn't master 1. So she knows that's something I definitely need to review before I get to my EOI. And then that test is actually also my final exam. So they have 3 times throughout the year they've taken it and that they can compare.
Where are your students currently against the aspiration and measurable goals you set for the year? What specifically are their results for so far?
Okay, so our measurable goals are 80% mastery on objectives, and then 100% of students will pass with proficient or advanced on the EOI. We are about to take our Unit 4 test, so we have most recent data from midterms. So on the diagnostic, our average was 36.5. On the midterm, it was a 55.1. So our growth is 18.6%. To pass the EOI, you have to have a 29 out of 55. So that calculates out to about a 51%. So that tells me that my kids taking the EOI right now would pass it. Are they going to score as well as they could? No, but we still have half of the material to learn.
How do you engage with the community in which you teach?
So outside of our actual school, my daughter attends a pre-K program in the community where we have weekly farmers markets and parent groups, parent-teacher conferences, and that's been one way that has been actually the most valuable way I've connected to parents throughout the school. A lot of my students' parents work there or have children there. So it's very easy to meet with parents outside of school in an environment that they're comfortable with. It kind of opens a door that they're watching out for my kid and I'm watching out for their kid, and that we can exchange information without it being treacherous areas to talk about children. They call me all the time with my child that's misbehaving. So inside the school, I sponsor the Spirit Club. We're responsible for crafting posters and memorabilia for pep rallies, basketball games, football games, pretty much every sport that we have here, we sponsor it and support it and attempt to invoke as much spirit throughout our school community as we can. We won the Tulsa Tech Spirit Stick for Channel 6 and we decorated it. I'm gonna grab it. I'm proud of it. see it. Okay, we won that through Tulsa Tech, and it was presented to us through a pep rally, and now we use it as a spirit stick among the classes and competitions at pep rallies. Let's see. What are my other community engagements? I think they're on the back of your paper.
What was your most entrepreneurial moment in the past couple of years, meaning the instance when you took initial to do something that hadn't been done before, where you were breaking new ground? Why do you consider this to be entrepreneurial? What happens as a result?
So I would say my most entrepreneurship moment was when I wrote a course through TPS. I was an art history major and a math minor, and the entire question I got every year of college, even after graduation, was, those are two completely opposite things. What are you going to do with those? But being an art history major and a math minor, I knew that those two things are very much connected. So as a teacher, I decided to write a course that is called Math, Art, Technology, and History, or acronym MATH. And it is a course that goes through applying math to real world. So whether it's in modern or minimalist architecture, or the algorithms in Rubik's Cubes, or the history of numbers and countings and the cultures they came from, it's actually designed to give students either a math credit or a fine art credit, whichever one they need. And I wrote the course from scratch, aligned it to standards that were high enough for the elective qualifications, submitted it to Tulsa Public Schools. I met with their board and presented it. I presented different aspects of my classroom as a geometry teacher and what I can integrate here. And then it was approved, and now I've been requested to do professional development and how to take that initiative into other schools and encourage other teachers to take that course and expand it. I've been super excited about it. I just finished my 2 first professional development sessions on it, and people seemed very enthusiastic. So it makes me excited because, to me, students come into math saying, what am I going to do with this? It's the age-old question. When am I going to use this in real life? And to me, that course connects as much as you can math to the real world. And I think that when you connect your concepts to the real world, it develops a love of learning. You feel like there is learning everywhere, and that's what I really want to see in students.